Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I am finally going to do something with all of these apples we brought home from the orchard. Our family goes every year toward the end of October and I buy bushels and bushels of seconds. That is just fruit that is not perfect. They have little imperfections, maybe a bruise or a tiny little bug hole, and they are still perfectly useful and severely discounted. So I started off not really having a plan. I filled 2 big mixing bowls with water and lemon juice so that the apples could soak and not turn brown while I am peeling and chopping all of them. I do have an apple peeler core slicer thing that I purchased from Aldi years ago for like $8, and well, you get what you pay for. It was awful. So you can see the ones in this bowl that I did use that on, but it was like falling apart. And I finally realized the amount of time it was taking me to do each apple, I could simply peel them by hand and slice them up however I wanted them. Again, as I started this processing day, I didn't even have a plan, which is totally not like me. But as I was slicing and peeling, I was also watching some of my favorite YouTubers process their apples. I believe it was Rachel over at this 1870s homestead, and also, of course, Becky at Acre Homestead. I believe she does an apple processing video every year, and I get great ideas from her every time. One of the things I've really tried to focus on this year is making sure that I'm using up every bit of everything that we grow, harvest, hunt, anything. We don't want anything to go to waste. So one of the things that I was excited about with this apple preservation day is making a huge stock pot of apple syrup. I filled this massive stock pot with water, and I think I did about 4 cups of sugar, and then into that pot went all of my scraps, cores, peels, any little bruised pieces, and then I'm going to just simmer it all day and until it reduces down, and then we will can it as apple syrup that we can thicken when we need it and use it for things like pancakes, waffles, or even putting over ice cream. It's pretty amazing all the things you can do with the scraps of the fruit and vegetables that you have. I decided to fill this old gallon pickle jar with more peelings and cores and bruised pieces and turn it into apple scrap vinegar or apple cider vinegar. We do purchase raw organic apple cider vinegar, and so it wouldn't be hard to kind of dump the mother that is left at the bottom of my jar in with this when I'm finished with our current store-bought jar, and to help speed the process along a bit. But I just filled this gallon jar up with water from our Berkey, and the instructions I followed called for a 1/4 cup of sugar for every 1/2 gallon of water and scraps. So this being a full gallon, I added 1/2 cup of sugar. Now I put a tiny jar in the top of this to kind of act as a weight to keep all of the scraps below the surface of the water. There are other simpler tools, but I like to use what I have. Then I placed one of my old raggedy cloth napkins and secured it with some yarn. Now, if you'd had a rubber band or even a loose hair tie, that would have been a lot easier, but this allows your soon-to-be apple cider vinegar to get some oxygen while keeping the bugs out. The next thing I wanted to do was take a bunch of my sliced apples and put them in the dehydrator. I wanted to fill the whole dehydrator up to make apple chips. Now, unfortunately, this entire dehydrator full is only going to fill about a 1/2 gallon jar, but my kids love these as snacks, and anything to get extra fruit and to offer healthier snacks is a win for me. This is what my apple scrap vinegar jar looked like once I went and set it on the counter, where it will remain undisturbed for several weeks. I do check it every couple of days to make sure the scraps are staying below the surface. I ended up having to switch out the napkin because it started bubbling over. Next, I decided to make Ruth Ann Zimmerman's apple cake. I have followed her for years on Instagram, and everything she makes for family dinner looks so amazing. And this apple cake with a vanilla glaze was no exception. This particular evening, I had a book club meeting to go to, and I had signed up to bring something sweet. And my husband was taking the rest of our children to the park for a picnic with several of our friends and their families. I'm going to write the recipe in the description below. This recipe was so simple, and guys, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Delicious, really easy to pull together. It didn't take very long. The cake was so moist, incredibly flavorful. It is full of diced apples, as you can see here as I'm adding them. I love finding new recipes where you have all of the ingredients. I always felt that way about the Pioneer Woman when she first became really popular kind of decades ago. I felt like I had every ingredient from all of her recipes, the majority of them anyways. I've really enjoyed compiling a handful of simple but delicious recipes for both main dishes and desserts for any time that you need to bring food to someone, whether they've had a baby or surgery or just a really hard week. The next thing I decided to do, I got from Becky over at Acre Homestead, and that was to make up one huge mixing bowl of apple pie filling and freeze it separate from pie crust, not necessarily trying to can it. I thought it was a really good idea, so I totally made up this pie filling recipe as I went along. Flour, sugar, cinnamon, a pinch of salt, super simple. And then this is what Becky did. She put parchment paper or butcher paper or freezer paper in her pie pans and then filled it with the pie filling, folded it up tight and tucked in the edges, and then stuck those in the freezer. And once they were frozen, I'm going to take these out and I will wrap them individually in plastic wrap and stick them back in the freezer. So then all I'll have to do is put it inside pie crust and it'll be ready to go. Look at the apple cake. It was perfection. And here are my finished dehydrated apples. These are delicious. Now, they are not crunchy. I said apple chips, but they're not crunchy. They're chewy, just like you would have dried mangoes or something like that from the grocery store. But the flavor gets condensed and it's delicious. And then here are my 6 or 7 quarts of apple syrup that I put on the shelf. You can see a little bit of apple sediment that settles at the bottom. This is going to be delicious. I did taste it a few times as it was reducing on the stovetop that day. And then I will probably add something like cornstarch or a little arrowroot powder to thicken it up a bit when we use it as syrup. The next thing I needed to do was make a side dish for my husband and the kids to take with them to this picnic potluck at the park. That's a lot of peas. So I decided to use one of these massive cans of corn that I get from Sam's. Anytime I have a chance to use the whole can at once, I jump on it. This is such a quick and easy side dish. I drained about 3/4 of the liquid out, poured the whole thing in the Instant Pot. I added a little more than a stick of butter. I just happened to have about 1/4 of a stick left in the refrigerator, so I grabbed that one as well. Then I added a generous amount of black pepper and a small can of diced green chilies. Give it all a good stir, and then you turn it on high pressure for 3 minutes. Now, while this was working in the Instant Pot, I set 2 blocks of cream cheese just in their foil packaging on the lid of my Instant Pot, and it got both blocks of cream cheese nice and soft and ready to stir in as soon as the pressure released on the Instant Pot. I added both packages of cream cheese, stirred it in really well until it was completely combined, and then I put the lid back on and left it on keep warm while I did the rest of my stuff before they had to leave. You could add rotel instead of just green chilies if you like. You could add salsa if you wanted to make it more like a dip. Just make sure that you drain all the liquid off of your corn completely, and I would omit the butter to make it a little bit thicker, and you could use corn chips for dipping. It's really just a simple and delicious side dish to make in a pinch. I think I'm actually going to add this to our Thanksgiving menu as well. I hope I've given you a little bit of inspiration as well as a few more easy recipes to have in your repertoire. Thanks for watching.